Back again for another Avoiding Pitfalls, this time lesson 14. We're talking about keeping the song interesting. I just want to give you a few things to keep in mind as you're going through this homework, just to make sure you get the most out of this lesson. So I'm just going to bang through these in no particular order. So first, when you are placing your sounds, if you've created sounds and you've got kind of samples now, little bits and pieces, typically what you're doing is you're placing that audio in different locations in your song to help that song move forward. What you want to pay particular attention to is where you're actually placing these sounds and how it affects your groove. So my suggestion is to move your samples in 16th note increments to make sure that you're finding like the best spot that gives your groove the most momentum. Second thing is, as you're adding your new sounds, you might be more excited about the new sounds than you are about the sounds that are already in your song. But you want to make sure that you're not conflicting with more important pieces of your groove when adding these parts. Remember, the goal of this isn't just to throw in a lot of sounds, but to put sounds where something seems to be needed. So be very careful that you're not conflicting with other sounds. And once again, just by moving a sound as little as a 16th note one way or the other, you could actually make it work in some cases. But in other cases, it's better to just keep that part of the song clean. So some parts can still be very effective at a really low volume. So you don't really need everything to be jumping out, especially if you've sliced up a groove to a drum rack using the slice to MIDI function. If you're creating like a new pattern or something like that goes underneath, make sure that you make it as simple as possible while keeping still interesting. Also, just check with the volume level. Sometimes I go as low as like minus 30 dB on sound, sometimes even lower, and it still gives the song a noticeable momentum that your listeners might not hear, but they will feel the difference. So just keep in mind that little tiny details can be pretty low in the mix and still be effective. Now, when you're adding percussion sounds or things that are more like drum sounds and things like that, I find that they tend to be, not in all cases, but they tend to be more effective if the decay is shorter because it keeps the song sounding cleaner. When you have too many sounds with longer decays, it starts to kind of muddy up your mix. So that's something that you can do that's very simple to clean up your mix. Now, obviously, you've got some reverse sounds or transition sounds that are meant to be kind of longer. But if you got like little jabs in there of percussion that are just throwing in a little offbeat interest, those could be pretty short and be really effective. Now next, you don't need to add these things to every bar or two bars. Like it doesn't need to be like a regular thing with all these sounds. Because what we're trying to do is build interest. So if you keep repeating the same sounds over and over, you have to make sure that it's really helping the groove. Because some of these sounds are going to be effective because they're unpredictable. So you don't want to make those sounds predictable by having it in the same place every 4 bars or whatever it is. So just keep that in mind as well. There's certain things that you might add that you want to go through the whole song and add to your groove as a whole. So try to categorize your sounds to things that are going to add to the main groove and things that are going to just be little accents. And those accents should stay unpredictable. Now the transition sounds, those are going to be really great for getting you from one 8 to 16 bar block to the next without your song sounding really loopy and blocky. So these sounds can be pretty important. You could put these sounds at kind of regular intervals, but what I would suggest is that you have several different transition sounds, even if they're kind of slightly different versions of the same thing. This way it keeps those transitions sounding interesting throughout your song. Sometimes using the same sound works just fine, but just keep in mind that the brain is interested in hearing things that it didn't hear before or hearing things that are slightly different. That's why kind of evolving sounds can be very effective in your songs. And then after you add your sounds, make sure to turn those sounds on and off. Mute the track and go kind of on and off. And make sure that it's helping the song and not hurting the song. You want to be very objective and really step back and just be the listener and not the creator. At the end of the day, what you're adding either works or it doesn't work, and you don't need to get emotional about it, and you don't need to spend too much time on it. But those are some tips that I think will help you avoid some of the pitfalls that may be somewhat common with this part of the songwriting process. So I hope this helps you guys. I hope you enjoy the lesson, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.